In a climate-controlled vault in northern Italy, there sits a fortune worth hundreds of millions of dollars. It is guarded, temperature-controlled, and monitored around the clock, exactly like a bank holding gold bullion. But there is no gold in this vault. There is no cash, and there are no jewels. Instead, stacked on endless wooden shelves that stretch up into the shadows, there are wheels of cheese. Hundreds of thousands of them. This is not a metaphor. There is a real bank in Italy that accepts wheels of Parmesan cheese as collateral for loans. Farmers hand over their cheese, the bank locks it away in its vault to age and lends them money against it, treating the cheese exactly like money in the bank. Because in a very real sense, that is what it is. A single wheel of properly aged Parmesan can be worth many hundreds of dollars, and there are rooms holding tens of millions of dollars worth of it, quietly ripening in the dark like treasure. Now stop and think about how strange that is, because cheese, for all its glory, began as something we would normally throw away in disgust. Cheese is, at its heart, spoiled milk. It is milk that has been curdled, soured, infected with bacteria, and in many cases deliberately grown through with mould, then left to rot under careful conditions for months or years. We took the single most perishable food we had, milk, which turns dangerous in a matter of hours, and we found a way to transform it into something that could survive for years, cross oceans, feed armies, and sit in a bank vault as a store of wealth. How did humanity learn to do that? How did we turn rot into treasure? The answer is one of the oldest and strangest stories in all of food, and it begins around 10,000 years ago with a problem that had no obvious solution. This is the history of cheese. Our story begins at the dawn of farming, when humans first domesticated animals like cows, sheep, and goats, and discovered they could take their milk. As we have explored before, milk was close to a miracle. A living animal could turn grass into a rich, renewable flood of fat, protein, and calcium available day after day. But that miracle came with two enormous problems. The first problem was time. Fresh milk spoils with terrifying speed. In a warm climate, without refrigeration, milk goes from fresh to sour to dangerous in a single day. For early farmers, a cow or a goat might produce far more milk than a family could drink before it turned. Most of that precious food was simply lost. The second problem was the human body itself. For most of history and for most of the people on Earth, adults could not properly digest fresh milk. The sugar in milk, called lactose, gave them cramps and sickness. So here were early humans, sitting on a gushing source of nutrition they could neither store nor, in many cases, comfortably drink. Milk was a treasure they could barely use. And then, somewhere, somehow, they solved both problems at once, almost certainly by accident. There is an old legend about how it happened. The story goes that a traveler, long ago, set out on a journey across the desert, carrying his milk in a pouch made from the dried stomach of a young animal. It was common to use animal stomachs as containers. When he stopped after hours in the heat and opened his pouch to drink, he found that his milk had transformed. It had separated into two things: a watery liquid and soft, white, solid lumps. Whether that exact story is true or not, the science behind it is very real, and it reveals the secret at the heart of all cheese. The stomachs of young milk-fed animals contain a substance called rennet, a set of powerful enzymes whose natural job is to curdle milk inside the animal's belly so it can be digested. When the traveler's milk sloshed around in that warm stomach pouch, the rennet went to work. It split the milk into solid curds and liquid whey. The traveler, we imagine, cautiously tasted the strange white lumps. And they were good. They were mild and rich, and best of all, they lasted. He had just made cheese. That single transformation was revolutionary because it solved both of milk's great problems in one stroke. Turning milk into cheese removes most of the water, which is what makes fresh milk spoil so quickly, leaving behind a concentrated, far more stable food. And the very process of curdling and fermenting the milk breaks down much of that troublesome lactose, so that even people who could not drink a glass of fresh milk could eat cheese without suffering for it. In one move, cheese made milk last and made milk safe. There is another way to think about what that meant. Before cheese, a summer of good grazing, when the animals were fat and the milk flowed freely, could not be saved. It was feast now and nothing later. Cheese changed that completely. It allowed a family to take the overflowing milk of spring and summer and lock it away in solid, keepable form. Food they could eat through the barren months of winter, or trade in a hard year, or fall back on when the harvest failed. Cheese was, in effect, humanity's first way to bank milk against hunger. A wheel of cheese was a stored season of plenty, waiting quietly on a shelf. This was not a small thing. It was one of the most important food technologies our ancestors ever developed, and the evidence shows they figured it out astonishingly early. Archaeologists digging in what is now Poland found fragments of pottery, roughly 7,000 years old, pierced all over with small holes, looking almost exactly like a modern cheese strainer. When scientists analyzed the residue trapped in that ancient clay, they found the chemical signature of milk fats. 7,000 years ago, Neolithic farmers were already straining curds from whey. Cheese is older than the pyramids. It is older than writing. It is one of the oldest prepared foods we can find any trace of at all. From those humble beginnings, cheese spread across the ancient world and wove itself into the heart of civilization after civilization. The ancient Sumerians knew cheese. The Egyptians made it and loved it enough to carry it into the afterlife. Archaeologists exploring a tomb at Saqqara discovered a jar containing the remains of a cheese roughly 3,200 years old, left as an offering for the dead. Egyptian tomb paintings show the process of cheese making itself. In fact, the oldest actual cheese ever found by archaeologists was not in Europe at all, but in the deserts of Western China. There, buried alongside ancient mummies whose bodies had been preserved by the dry desert air, scientists found small clumps of real cheese smeared on the chests and necks of the dead more than 3,600 years ago. It is the oldest cheese in the world, and the people who made it valued it so highly that they sent it with their loved ones into the grave, provisions for the journey into death. In ancient Crete, clay tablets written in one of the earliest forms of Greek carefully recorded flocks and inventories of cheese, treating it as a valued resource to be counted and stored. The Greeks folded cheese deep into their myths and daily life. In Homer's ancient tale of the Odyssey, the hero Odysseus and his men break into the cave of the monstrous one-eyed Cyclops. And what do they find inside? Not gold. They find racks of drying cheeses and pails full of curds and whey. Even a man-eating giant, it seems, was a cheesemaker. To the Greeks, cheese was simply part of the fabric of the world. But it was the Romans who truly turned cheesemaking into an art and an industry. They developed sophisticated techniques, built dedicated cheese kitchens in their villas, and spread their methods across their vast empire, from Britain to the Middle East. Roman soldiers received cheese as part of their rations because hard, aged cheese was the perfect food for a marching army. It was packed with energy, it would not spoil on a long campaign, and it could be carried for weeks. In a very real way, cheese helped feed the legions that conquered the ancient world. And this points to something remarkable about how far our ancestors had come. Because to make many of these cheeses, humans had to do something that goes against every instinct we have about food. They had to embrace rot on purpose. Think about it. Everything in our biology screams at us to avoid spoiled food, mould, and decay. These are the signals of danger, of poison, of sickness, and yet cheese, in its most glorious forms, is nothing less than carefully controlled decay. When you eat a blue cheese, veined with those striking streaks of blue and green, you are eating a cheese that has been deliberately injected with a specific mould. a relative of the very same mold that gave us the antibiotic penicillin. The cheesemaker wants that mold. They cultivate it, they encourage it, and they age the cheese in cool, damp caves, precisely because that is where the mold thrives. The most famous of these blue cheeses were ripened for centuries in the cold limestone caves of France, where the perfect mold grew naturally in the darkness. Legend says the cheese was discovered when a shepherd left his lunch of bread and curds in a cave and returned weeks later to find it transformed by the blue mold into something extraordinary. Humans looked at food that had gone moldy in a cave, and instead of throwing it away, they took a bite, and they decided it was delicious. We took this idea to almost unbelievable extremes. On the island of Sardinia, there is a traditional cheese so extreme that most of the world considers it a step too far. It is made by deliberately allowing live insects, the larvae of the cheesefly, to hatch and live inside the cheese. As these tiny maggots eat their way through it, they break the cheese down into a soft, intensely flavored paste. This cheese is so far beyond normal food safety that it has been officially restricted. Yet for generations it was treasured as a delicacy. This is the strange genius of cheese. It is the one great food where humans learned not to fight decay, but to steer it. To take the bacteria, the enzymes, the mold, even the insects, all the forces that normally destroy our food, and to guide them patiently into creating something wonderful. Every wheel of cheese is a tiny controlled act of rot, tamed by human hands. And it was in the Middle Ages that this art reached new heights, largely thanks to an unexpected group of people. Monks. Across medieval Europe, monasteries became the great research laboratories of cheese. Monks had time, discipline, cool stone cellars, and herds of animals. Crucially, their religious calendars were full of long fasting periods when they were forbidden from eating meat, which made rich, fatty cheese an essential source of nourishment. So the monks experimented endlessly, patiently, generation after generation. They perfected the aging of cheese in caves and cellars. They developed many of the famous cheeses that still bear the names of their regions and monasteries today. The astonishing variety of cheeses we enjoy now, the thousands of distinct types, each with its own character, owes an enormous debt to centuries of quiet, careful work by monks who treated cheesemaking almost as a form of devotion. This is why cheese, more than almost any other food, carries the taste of a specific place. The particular grasses the animals graze on, the wild bacteria drifting in the local air, the exact temperature and dampness of the cave where the cheese is aged, all of it leaves its mark on the final wheel. A cheese from one valley can taste completely different from a cheese made just a few miles down the road. Over the centuries, this gave rise to the incredible range we know today, from hard and crumbly to soft and oozing, from mild and milky to sharp enough to sting the tongue. There are now thousands of distinct cheeses in the world, and each one is, in a sense, an edible fingerprint of the exact place and the people that made it. By this point, cheese had become far more than food. It had become wealth. And this brings us back to that bank vault in Italy. Here is the key that unlocks the whole mystery of cheese as treasure. Time. A great aged cheese is not just milk. It is milk plus time, sometimes years of it. A hard cheese like Parmesan is aged for 1, 2, even 3 years or more before it is ready. During all that time, someone has to store it, guard it, turn it, and care for it, while their money sits locked inside it, doing nothing but slowly ripening. That aging is expensive, and it is exactly what makes the cheese so valuable. A finished wheel represents years of stored labor, stored milk, and stored time, all concentrated into a single golden object. That is why a real wheel of aged Parmesan can be worth a small fortune, and why that Italian bank treats it exactly like gold. The bank lends farmers money, takes their young cheeses into its temperature-controlled vaults, and ages them under perfect conditions as security against the loan. If a farmer cannot repay, the bank can sell the cheese to recover its money. It is, quite literally, a savings account made of cheese. And where there is treasure, there are thieves. Aged cheese is stolen so often that criminals have raided storehouses and made off with truckloads of wheels, because a single load of Parmesan can be worth more than a load of most other goods. People steal cheese for the same reason they steal gold. But not all cheese went in the direction of the priceless artisan wheel. In the 20th century, cheese took a very different and very modern turn. Because for all its virtues, traditional cheese was inconsistent, and even in its aged form, it could still eventually spoil. Then, in 1916, an American named James Kraft patented a process that would change cheese forever. He found a way to grind up cheese, heat it, and blend it with emulsifiers into a smooth, uniform product that would essentially never spoil, that could be sliced perfectly, melted perfectly, and shipped anywhere without refrigeration. This was processed cheese, the ancestor of the individually wrapped orange slices and the smooth, meltable blocks that filled supermarkets today. To purists, it was barely cheese at all, a kind of cheese-flavored invention. But it was cheap, convenient, and utterly reliable, and it helped put cheese onto every table, into every sandwich, and eventually onto billions of burgers and pizzas across the planet. If ancient cheese was about embracing time and decay, modern processed cheese was about defeating them completely. And this modern, industrial-scale approach to cheese led to one of the most bizarre episodes in the entire history of food. The saga of the government cheese caves. It happened in the United States. For decades, the American government had propped up the dairy industry, promising to buy up surplus milk to keep prices stable and protect farmers. In the 1970s, this support was poured on more heavily than ever, with billions of dollars flowing into dairy. Farmers, guaranteed a buyer, did exactly what you would expect. They produced more and more milk, and the government kept buying it. But milk spoils. So to preserve all that surplus, the government had it turned into the one thing that lasts: cheese. And soon the government found itself buried under a literal mountain of it. Hundreds of millions of pounds of processed cheese with nowhere to put it. So they hid it underground. They stored it in vast converted limestone mines, cool natural caverns beneath the state of Missouri and elsewhere, which became known as the government cheese caves. The pile grew and grew. By the mid-1980s, the United States government was sitting on well over £1 billion of surplus cheese, enough for roughly £5 for every single person in the country, slowly aging in caves at taxpayer expense. It was costing a fortune just to store. One government official, at a loss for what to do, reportedly suggested that the cheapest and most practical solution would simply be to dump it all into the ocean. At one point, the Secretary of Agriculture held up a moldy block of it at a press conference to show reporters the scale of the problem. Finally, facing public outrage over a mountain of food rotting underground while people went hungry during a recession, the government began giving it away, handing out £5 blocks of pale orange processed cheese to the poor and the elderly. An entire generation grew up knowing the taste of that distinctive block simply as government cheese. A nation had become so extraordinarily good at making cheese that it had drowned in its own surplus and buried the evidence in caves. And to this day, huge quantities of cheese, well over £1 billion, still sit aging in cold storage across America. Though now it is mostly owned by private companies, waiting to be eaten by a country that cannot get enough of it. Which brings us to now, and to just how much cheese the modern world devours. Cheese has utterly conquered the global diet. In the United States, the average person eats around 40 pounds of it every single year. In the great cheese-loving nations of Europe, like France and Italy, people eat nearly double that. Cheese blankets our pizzas and melts over our burgers. It fills our sandwiches, crowns our pasta, and sits at the center of the celebration board at every party. The global appetite for it grows year after year, an endless river of milk being turned into an endless mountain of cheese. There may even be a hidden reason we love cheese quite so much. Cheese is extraordinarily concentrated. It can take around 10 pounds of milk to make a single pound of it, packing all of the milk's fat, protein, and flavor into one intense bite. But scientists have pointed to something stranger still. When our bodies break down casein, the main protein in milk and cheese, it releases compounds called casomorphins, which are able to interact gently with some of the same receptors in the brain that respond to soothing, pleasurable signals. Some researchers have suggested this is part of why cheese can feel so deeply comforting and so very hard to stop eating. Whether or not cheese is addictive in any strict sense, few foods on earth inspire the sheer devotion that it does. So think back on the whole journey. A gushing, perishable, hard-to-digest liquid that early humans could barely use. Transformed by a lucky accident with an animal's stomach into a food that could last for years and that almost anyone could eat. Carried into Egyptian tombs and Roman army packs. Perfected in the cold caves of medieval monasteries, where humans learned the almost magical trick of guiding rot and mould into something delicious. Turned into treasure so valuable that banks lock it in vaults and thieves steal it by the truckload. Reinvented by industry into a product that never spoils, and then produced in such staggering quantities that an entire government once buried its leftovers in caves beneath the earth. It is one of the most remarkable stories any food has ever written. And the strangest part of all is what cheese truly is, at its core. Every single time you melt a slice over a burger, or grate a hard cheese over your pasta, or spread a soft one across a cracker, you are eating controlled decay. You are eating milk that was deliberately curdled, soured, and in many cases grown through with living mold, then patiently guided by human hands into something wonderful. Cheese is proof of one of the most beautiful ideas in all of human history. That, with enough patience and enough care, we can take the very forces of rot and ruin, the things that destroy our food and frighten our senses, and turn them into treasure. The next time you unwrap a piece of cheese, remember that you are holding one of humanity's oldest and cleverest inventions. A little tamed act of decay, first discovered by accident thousands of years ago, and loved so much that we have never, ever stopped. If this story surprised you, subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden histories behind the everyday things all around you. Drop a like if you learned something new, and leave a comment telling me which part of the cheese story surprised you the most. There is a lot more history still waiting to be uncovered.